Next, we're going to be looking at a RCE and Sawtooth software Lighthouse Studio. This was a vulnerability that was discovered by Adam on our research team. So what is this software? It's a survey software for enterprise. That might not sound as appealing, but this has been around for a really long time. And basically, they have a desktop application as well as a web application that can serve pretty much dynamic surveys to very large audiences. The funny thing is with this one is it's quite hard to fingerprint from the external internet. And it's probably some software that you have not even realized you were using when you used it. It's one of those softwares that's kind of lurking around, that's quite difficult to identify in general. But essentially, it's used in a lot of places that you wouldn't expect. If you search your email inbox for CIWWEB, you'll find all the different locations where this software is in use. For example, when I searched one of my inboxes, I could find that Financial Times and some other company, Yarra Valley Water, was using this software for their surveys as well. So this is one of those softwares that I think that is difficult to identify, and we were quite curious as we came across this on one of our customers' attack surfaces. But the actual exposure of this is much greater than most people expect. When we got the software and took a look at what was inside, quickly we realized that it's just a large collection of Perl scripts that are installed within a specific directory. It is freely available, so you can download this software yourself and take a look at some of these Perl scripts as well. But when we started looking at these Perl scripts, we realized that they've been minified and obfuscated, and they were quite difficult to understand in their current form. These days we're quite fortunate because we have a lot of assistance with AI to help us deobfuscate some of this. So what we did is we used Google Gemini, and we passed in all of the obfuscated code to Google Gemini with 1 million context, and it gave us a deobfuscated version, or its best attempt at deobfuscating. Now, it wasn't perfect. Google Gemini did allow us to grasp the concepts of the source code, but there were many, many mistakes that it made, assumptions that it made, or just generally incorrect code when comparing it to the original source code that was obfuscated. So what we did was we kept the original obfuscated source code as a reference to double check anything that we found inside the deobfuscated code from Gemini. But all in all, I think Gemini did a pretty good job, and it was definitely a lot more readable and approachable this way, really speeding up the time that it took us to discover this critical vulnerability. So an easy source that we found was there was some sort of templating logic going on inside this software, which kind of makes sense. You need some sort of templating, but we weren't sure if this was going to be something that a user could control. But when we saw this, we were quite interested because this logic here that you see on the right basically obtains the text between the percentage signs after a square bracket. And this seems quite interesting. What's happening with the text inside this? So it's using some regex to obtain it and processing it in some way. So what is the processing? When we look at the processing itself, and I don't know if you notice it in that code there, but on the right, there is a sync to eval. Eval, short for evaluate. In Perl, this is a clear pathway to remote command execution and remote code execution generally as well. So the journey began to figure out how can we reach this sync. So we know that there's some sort of templating language. We know that if we can provide this templating language and it renders, then it will end up in an eval sync, which should lead to remote code and remote command execution ultimately. What we found was that there was a specific parameter that CIWeb.pl was accepting called HID_random_ACARAT. And when we found this parameter, it was pointing to that specific templating function that led to the eval sync. It seemed like a pretty straightforward command execution vulnerability from there. How we confirmed this was essentially just first trying a simple evaluation of 7 times 7, which is obviously equal to 49. And we sent this request where we provided this parameter. And from seeing the response, we saw quickly that it evaluated to 49. At this point, it was quite straightforward to escalate this to command execution. All we have to do in Perl, the syntax for executing commands is simply a backtick. So if you have backtick, command backtick, it will execute the command in the middle. In this case, if we provided backtick ls backtick, it will execute the ls command on the underlying system. As an attacker at this stage, I'd obviously catch a reverse shell, and the impact could be quite catastrophic, as you could pretty much compromise the entire host machine or the network that it's on. For this specific vulnerability, there has been a CV that's released, and there has been a patch released, which is version 9.16.14. We recommend that you upgrade to this version to remediate this vulnerability as soon as possible.